Hey, it's Kathy. This is our 10th and final Journey into Cybersecurity podcast. And to cap off the season two, I really wanted to have Collin Roach on this podcast because he's going to tell us how to not break but ease into cybersecurity because he had a really unique approach on how to get into cybersecurity. And so I am just dying to share your story, Colin. So, hello.
Hey, thank you for having me, Kathy. So my name is Collin. I am a security engineer at Penda working on our security operations team. So I'm over there protecting everything from our endpoint assets all the way up to our servers, basically any sort of thing as well within my domain. So,
Awesome. So we're going to start from the beginning, how this all became a reality. So you're still super young, but let's start with when you were in, elementary through high school. What kind of a kid was Colin?
well, frankly, when I was a kid, I was very shy. And I spent a lot of the past couple of years trying to deal with that and growing and obviously getting out there more. And it's been a real challenge, but especially the very early stages of me were shy. But over the past, or but even with that, there's always been a sense of wonder and just like trying to investigate and learn
Mhm.
new things. I've tried to have my hands on technology for a long time now,
Yeah.
in some capacities. I've always just remembered a computer always being there in my life, strangely enough.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So I'm Gen X, you're Gen Z, right? Is that
Yeah.
okay? So I did not grow up with computers at all until like at the end of college. And they were still like beasts and very slow. And back then it was just all dial up and, you know, just not very user friendly and inviting technology. But you grew up with technology at an earlier age. So when was that introduced? How soon were you having your hands on all that?
Well, uh, I think one of my oldest memories is having a laptop that from my parents that I disassembled just to have fun with. So, really, as far back as I can remember, the first time I had my own device was probably in elementary school. I was one of the first people to have a phone. Not sure that was the best approach for a child, but it was how I learned and grew up with technology. I guess the first time I had a laptop for myself was probably somewhere in middle school, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of really where it exploded with
Yeah,
my curiosity in that regard.
that's really amazing. And was technology part of the educational process in school, or was that just something you did at home?
Not really until high school. I mean, I did
Mhm.
have some typing classes in middle
Yes.
school, but I really wouldn't call that a too
No.
deep of a technology class.
Yeah.
But the first time I actually took a course was high school. I took a couple programming classes.
Mhm.
And I think in my senior year, they actually ended up opening up a cybersecurity course, but I didn't end up taking it at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah, that
impressive.
was, oh yeah, it was brand new. Yeah.
Wow. And so when was the concept of cybersecurity introduced to you?
Well, one of the big things that I did throughout middle and high school was Civil Air Patrol. And that is kind of a youth leadership organization. It's kind
Mhm.
of similar to a GROTC kind of concept. So that's usually how I introduce it. But I remember my first meeting walking in, and this was probably in eighth grade. I was getting like the lay of the land, what they all did, and I remember seeing like a group of kids all the way on the other side of the conference area. They're all huddled over a laptop, and I was asking, "What are they doing?" And they're like, "Oh, they're doing this thing called Cyber Patriot, and they are trying to secure systems and learning about how that does." And I wasn't eligible at the time because I was too young, but
Right.
The next year, the first time I was eligible, I was on that team.
That's awesome. Well, good for you for actually reaching out, right? Shy kid that
Yeah.
you were.
Yeah.
So tell more a little bit about Cyber Patriot because I think it's a little secret. Not everybody knows about it.
Oh yeah. So Cyber Patriot is kind of endpoint defense competition. So they give you like a couple of machines, and these will have a couple of vulnerabilities. And usually, when I mean that, those are just security misconfigurations. So you'll hop on for a couple hours, type away on all sorts of servers and endpoints, trying to secure it. And there is also some added elements of networking. So they have you in on there on a packet tracer, but this competition pits almost everyone against each other. So there are groups from middle schools all the way up through high schools, all across the country and even across the world. As it's also supported by these military organizations, so the JRTC groups, Civil Air Patrol, and some of those have international areas. So it is really a worldwide. But there's a couple rounds to it, all the way leading up to the national finals. At least all sorts of fun things. But it was my first introduction to a lot of security fundamentals, how to secure a machine.
Yeah. So, isn't that Cyber Patriot program dependent on you having an adult or a mentor who kind of oversees and guides you? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, that is correct. So when I went in, they already had one, so I didn't
Mhm.
have to worry about getting myself one. But it requires at least a coach, a team lead, and I think at least one other member to actually get a team off the ground.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like I said, we had one for a little bit. I don't really think there is an actual official requirement for what qualifies as a coach, though. I'm sure most schools get a teacher to sponsor it, and then we one our coach was actually an engineer over at Cisco, and his kid was also in Civil Air Patrol, so that's why he was doing and coaching it. He'd been coaching it for a long time, and we were very confident in his abilities.
Oh, that's really cool. That is so important. So, who else were kind of your mentors or cheerleaders throughout your high school years, and then how did you get into college? What was the path there?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, without a doubt, I think my biggest cheerleader was probably my mother.
Mhm.
She's supported me at pretty much every single stage of the way. I remember when, you know, she was the first person to take me to these Civil Air Patrol, these Cyber Patriot events. And so she's probably my biggest cheerleader, getting me just to the starting line. Um,
Wow.
and then after that, it was really just a rotation of security professionals that were there trying to educate us and introduce us to this new kind of concept, which was cybersecurity. Um, and usually these were like Civil Air Patrol alumni, but some of them were just
Hmm.
engineers and coworkers over with our coach over at Cisco. So we got a lot of hands-on and fun time with a lot of these people that were, experts in their field in
Yeah.
networking and cybersecurity.
So these were volunteers, right?
Yes, all of them were volunteers.
Wow.
They were not getting compensated for this.
Wow. Yeah. Well, kudos to them because, who knew where you would be if it wasn't for them and
Yeah.
that program and your mom.
Yes. I'm very thankful for all of them.
So tell us now about your college experience.
Oh yeah. So um I kind of went with the approach that college was always kind of always the goal for what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
So I didn't really have a decision of if I was going to college. It was kind of a where I was going to college.
Okay.
And so I would spend probably the latter half of my high school time, last 2 years, looking. Um, and so I think I ended up the kind of requirements for me were something local, but also something that kind of had an existing and well supported cybersecurity program. And it actually limited down my options quite a lot. Um, I think I was kind of down to UNC Charlotte, which had a cybersecurity program for over
Yeah.
20 years at that time, and then ECU,
Yeah.
which had one for probably also 20 years. And they had both had a credential called what is it? The CANCX. which is an accreditation program offered by the NSA and the DoD.
Oh, wow.
That just yeah, yeah, they just accredit it, and I think it's in areas of research, and then cybersecurity, defense, and teaching. And
Mm-hmm.
so both of them had it, and those were kind of my two last options. But what sealed it for me is I got to go on both campuses, and I remember meeting with the chair of ECU and some of the other higher level professors and being really thrilled about their engagement, how they kind of handled the classroom. And so that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of what led me to make a decision of going and joining ECU.
Awesome. Yeah. And do you feel like ECU and that program prepared you for the real world? Is there a gap between college versus the real world?
Yeah. Um, so I've been a professional for a year now, and I'm sure we'll get to that later in the podcast. Um, and I remember it was a big jump to me, going from the academic kind of style to the actual professional style.
Yeah.
Still kind of trying to tackle that. I wouldn't say I'm the most seamless even now working on it. And then there's always like new technologies and being flexible. Um, when I was a senior, that was late 2022 and
Mm-hmm.
23, and that's obviously when ChatGPT was released, and so we had a whole like spring semester to figure out AI, in advance of going and working. So that was kind of like we had to improvise quick on what we learned sometimes. So I uh, I love I love DCU, and what
Yeah.
they taught me.
Yeah.
But this is not just a problem with ECU, but it's really a problem with a lot of schools, is how we can remain flexible and learning these new technologies. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah. It's almost impossible. And yeah, throw in AI and like, okay, where do we begin? That's awesome that they immediately allowed you to kind of get your hands dirty. So that's good. Um, so how did you end up at ISSA as the youngest active member in history, or at
Yeah,
least that I ever met?
yeah. So I joined ISSA when I was 15, but how I was introduced to that was, so my mother, like I said, my champion, she had reached out to the CISO of where she worked, Duke University Health System, which at the time was a man named Chuck Kessler, and he came and actually spoke at one of our Civil Air Patrol events. And then after that, he kind of introduced me. So he introduced me to the ISSA, which he was the vice president of at the time, and he asked
Mhm.
me to come and sit in for a meeting and see what it was like. And so I went to that first meeting, and I was like, "This is amazing!" And I think like a couple of days later, I got my membership. So and I haven't really stopped showing up.
Mhm.
So I've been doing that for several years now.
Yes, age 15. That's quite amazing. I think you did kind of open the door to other children or students to become part of our community as early as they want to. But I think it's just amazing that your mom just was your champion, like you said, and you weren't too intimidated by attending all these grown up meetings. You could find a way to feel at home there. So I think that's just amazing. And we still go, right?
Yeah. I was there last month. I'm probably going to go next month too, or tomorrow,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. But the thing is, you are such a role model to the next kid in line to kind of see, well, this is how it's done. By becoming part of the community, there's a trust factor there that I think mattered, right? Did this help you, all this networking and participation at these meetings help you at all in kind of getting employment?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I used to, like, when I was advising and helping other underclassmen when I was still at ECU. I'd always given them kind of like especially when you can't have experience, as a student, or at least it's hard to get it. I'd always introduce that. Um, there's kind of three things that they would need, and that would suit them very well. And that's kind of the networking. There is also the certifications in some aspects, and then outside engagement of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But I would say without a doubt, the networking is the single biggest element.
Yeah.
Um, I have, I, you know, I, well, the first connection I made, Chuck, who introduced me to ISSA, was also the one that ended up offering me an internship many years later. So, without that kind of connection, I wouldn't have made it. And then I have been able to, throughout the past couple of years, throughout the connections I've made, I've been able to, ask for help, and they've been able to guide me through all sorts of things as I've made this transition over the past year throughout all the certifications I've tried to pursue. And then they've been helping me try to provide resources through that, mostly through the
Mhm.
ISSA, not individually. But without a doubt, I would say the networking is the single biggest aspect. I wish it was stronger on ECU, but it's kind of an hour and a half away from those ISSA meetings, so it makes it a little bit difficult. But
Mhm.
I whenever I recommend people, I always say find a local chapter in their area.
Yeah.
If there's not ISA, there's many other good chapters out there. There's the Cloud Security Alliance, there's
Mhm.
IEEE, InfraGard, all sorts of great organizations, and they are all willing to be amazing and help you guide you through your journey.
Yeah. And I know there are informal meetups as well, where professionals come together. They seem to like beer. Also, I know that much. Not that I would recommend students to be having beer early on, but I know that they do like to gather and have fun at the same time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I keep
but
getting told that there's some sort of secret brunch that goes on in Raleigh, and I want to go join it.
you got to get into that one. Yeah. But I think the importance of agency cannot be stressed enough. Nobody gets in cybersecurity by themselves. Nobody succeeds by themselves. It takes a village, truly, to help someone succeed in this space, because it's a bit overwhelming sometimes. Definitely as a young student. Um, Now, what other programs are available to students today? Which ones would you recommend other than associations? We talked about Cyber Patriot. Is there anything else that they could do?
Well, I well, that's kind of a challenging one. Um, Other than well, and you really get me stumped on that. So I know when I was at ECU, these were like club teams. So they were sponsored by ISSA to help us, but I would still consider them kind of separate because we ran our own competition team, which is a really great way to get hands-on experience to all sorts of blue teaming and red teaming.
Mm-hmm.
So the big competition that we did every year was called the uh, uh, Cybersecurity Defense Competition, or
Mm-hmm.
CCDC, or the Collegiate Cybersecurity Defense Competition. And we would always be there showing up, helping. If we didn't advance, we'd always be helping as volunteers. But just really finding any ways to engage. Um, it was just amazing. We did plenty of other competitions. And then there's like the smaller organizations like the DC groups. And I know there's the local DC 919 chapter.
Yeah,
They get together all the time for all sorts of like red teaming and security stuff.
yeah, and capture the flags as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, what type of internships are available today? You mentioned you were able to get an internship through Chuck, but how easy is it to get one these days? What should students do to get them?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say they're easy. Internships are very challenging, but it was a requirement for us to graduate at ECU, so it was a must to
Okay,
get one.
that's good.
Um, yeah, I actually like that kind of strategy of having a requirement. It definitely gets you placed easier. Um,
Mm-hmm.
What's I know like there's really it's really hard to find a very strict cybersecurity one. I'd say most school or most firms they'll do it where it's a derivative of a computer science.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I know at Pendo where I work, they actually have a strict cybersecurity one. And our kind of role, or at least what I also this is what I also did 2 years ago, was kind of like a an analyst, a mix between an analyst and an engineer. So I was presented with this fun project, and I was kind of tasked with, you have to kind of create or implement the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was me, myself, and another security intern at the time. We had worked all summer to kind of build this product, and that ended up being used for their October Cybersecurity Awareness Month later in the year.
Oh, that's
Um, yeah, no, it was awesome to hear about. But I think that deviates from maybe what we considered the normal cybersecurity experience. Um, but yeah, I always like it. It was the project experience. Yeah.
that's really cool. Um, I saw that you actually have to apply the fall before the summer of the internship. Is that the common rule of thumb now, that you have to start looking for an internship the year before?
Oh yeah. So I know with usually the ones that get the earliest are, this is also in comp science, the perspective is the financial firms and
Mhm.
the FANG companies. They as soon as their internships end, they immediately start evaluating. So
Okay.
I know it was probably when I was recruited. I think I had applied and did my first interview in like October, November. Um, so yeah, and then I had like further later interviews in like December. And it kind of pushes throughout the year, but yeah, it was very very early on in the process. It kind of almost like spooked me because I almost missed it on accident.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just came up so quick.
Right. Exactly. So that's a good tidbit of advice, is to start looking early for an internship.
Yeah.
But they're pretty hard to get a hold of, right? I feel like people struggle to find them. Would you kind of make or recommend more organizations to provide them as an opportunity to learn?
Oh, 100%. I know if you're still at a college or university, a lot of college or a lot of universities have support organizations for this. So I know at ECU we actually had a little like career center that was strictly for engineering that could help you. But I
Mhm.
honestly think I think people should, or I think firms should have more of these.
Mhm.
I've spoken, internally about what is our attitude towards our intern program, and we are without a doubt all supportive of it. I like, and from what I've seen, from my intern project, and then the couple years that have come after mine, and seeing what has all happened. Um, you can bring in these brilliant students, and they can come in and be leading these amazing projects that can have years worth of impact. um, Sometimes it is all about introducing a new technology as a proof of concept, and just
Mhm.
exploring a new idea, and then trying to find that value in that idea before you task a full-time engineer on it. But
Yeah.
I'd say we use our intern program as kind of like a is an amazing, well, I mean, realistically, every intern we push through our intern program is learning some amazing new technology, so
Wow.
they can help us.
Yeah, I always thought an internship was kind of offloading some of the tasks that, people didn't want to really do, kind of the dirty work, or the more repetitive stuff that, is not too intensive, and shouldn't be hard to kind of ramp into. But you getting an actual project to test new technology or new concepts, that's really, really cool, because it makes sense, right? You are probably introduced to new technology as you're still learning, versus an organization that may have been using the same technology for some time, right?
Yeah. um yeah, it was like when I showed up, it was a lot of things were completely new to me.
Mhm.
Surprisingly enough, it was actually my first introduction to like the practical cloud elements. We had talked about it in the classroom, but I showed up and they were like, all right, we're going to try and build this little like application. And I'm like, in the cloud, I'm like, okay, I don't know how to do that, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
um and that's kind of like what I think the internship process is all about. It's all about
Hmm.
you've got this crazy idea at the beginning. You don't know how it'll turn out, but I, I think it's always a learning experience. You learn something new towards the end, and I can say that what I did had a direct impact on a lot of people. It did a lot of good things.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's so much power and value in an internship that benefits both sides. And I think that's the important message here, that it's not just to benefit the intern, but the organization too, and maybe the people who get to have a helping hand, because I know cybersecurity people are usually under resourced, or at least strapped. So I think you may be the exception, in the sense that I know Chuck is a leader in the community, and definitely puts cybersecurity front and center. But that may not always be the case in some organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Either way, I think having an intern is always going to be a strength. It's always going to be a strength. I think if you have an intern and it's a weakness, I don't know. I don't think that's a positive necessarily on your organization.
and it's a great way to kind of get to know each other and see if it's a good fit on both sides, if you like each other, if culturally the values align between the person and the organization. So it's good for everybody to kind of have that first go at it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
if you were a hiring manager, what would be the skills that you would say these are the must-haves and these are the ones that we can teach?
Well, I'd say the ones that kind of helped me throughout the hiring process, and then ones that have helped me the most over the past year, being in my first year, is probably a mix between a desire to learn and a bit of flexibility.
Hmm.
Um, I know that in security, things are always changing. Um, yeah, like I've had to learn, every single day I'm learning something new. So if you're not, ready and prepared to come and do that every single day,
Yeah,
then security might be difficult for you.
yeah.
And then the other element with the flexibility part, I'd say one of the biggest things that have helped me kind of accomplish a lot of the goals that I wanted to accomplish is just being, flexible with the kind of things. So I was offered to do a panel earlier in the year, and that was pretty much just because I was sitting at the right table at the time, and he's like, "Do you want to go do this?" And I was like, "Yes." I'm like stressed out inside, but I'm like, all right, let's go do this. You
Yay.
know, whether it doesn't matter if it's a good or bad experience. It's just something new to do. So I'd say be flexible. Um, Maybe a little bit of boldness, even.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and that's I'd say even some boldness, even.
Yeah, because the growth happens when you step outside of your comfort zone, right? That's when you kind of are learning something new, or something that you weren't comfortable doing before, but here you are. I saw that panel, and that was really great, and good for you.
Thank
The
you.
Shy Collin graduated. Now, AI, we got to mention it, right? The value of
Hmm.
AI is that it's increasing the effectiveness and efficiencies in the analysis, in the translations, summarization, reporting, and audit, all of it, right?
Hmm.
So, what should analysts level up on, now that the big beast has been unleashed?
I would say that the best thing an analyst could do, um, is probably understand how AI is being used as kind of like a threat actor.
Mhm.
Um, so I'd consider, I mean, well, because AI is already being used in a lot of all sorts of tools. It's being used in endpoint technologies. It's being used in network applications. But generally speaking, you don't see a lot of analysts doing it. That's usually those vendors that have
Mhm.
the big resources to go and spend on that. Um, so, as much as I would love to introduce more AI, there's not too many new avenues to do it that a lot of these big vendors have already not tried.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd say over the past 2 years, with the introduction of generative AI, um, these phishing emails that I've seen get a whole lot more convincing every single time I see them. Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, there's some that have been so convincing, and I'm like, if I didn't think of like even twice about that, I'd probably click on that. It looks
Right.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a flip side to AI. It's got both good and bad applications.
Oh
But
yeah.
I've seen generative AI being used by Microsoft now in their Copilot, prompt, so that kind of complements all of their cybersecurity functionality, whether it's Defender, Sentinel, and so forth. So it's going to get very interesting to see how all this innovation will affect the job of a security analyst, whether it's the like you say, the threat will evolve, but then also the tool set to detect,
Mhm.
respond to them will evolve as well. So yeah, lots of learning coming up
Oh,
probably.
yeah. And I know one good example. I mean, this is back to the one good example of how it's being used in the analyst side as well as one of the products at Sentinel One. They're using generative AI to translate kind of human language into queries, which I think is an amazing use case. And I think it's probably closer to the Microsoft Copilot,
Yeah.
where it's using the human language to kind of translate into these more technical queries, which does help if you're either new or not comfortable doing that. So it's a great way to like not gatekeep. Um, that's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. I think being able to just get a summary of what the incident was and what to do next, just eliminating so much time of analysis for the analyst, so that the response window closes, so that the impact ultimately is reduced, hopefully to a minimal impact. I think the power is there. So to be continued, right?
Oh yeah. It changes every single day, and it's
Yeah.
gonna just keep growing. It's at this point, it's not gonna leave in our lifetime. So you might as well get used to it while it's here.
Hmm. So let's talk about the common saying, where we say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a cyber threat becomes a reality, whether it's to a person or to an organization, any shape or size. Are people starting to get it?
Well, if you'd asked me like 2 weeks ago, I would still say no. But with the CrowdStrike incident, it might be a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll go off what it was 2 weeks ago. Um, I'd still say it's I say it's in some capacities, in some organizations, it's definitely picking up. I'd say at Penda we have a very healthy attitude towards cybersecurity, but I would
Mhm.
say in general, um, it's kind of I'd say it's probably about 50-50.
Mhm.
Um, I have communicated with some people where some tech literacy, maybe like a precursor, because I would consider
Mhm.
cybersecurity to be a very advanced kind of computer topic. And so there are, I guess, some like gaps between basic understanding of how computers work and how they operate, which I think should be talked about more.
Mhm.
Um, and that can kind of be a gatekeeper to talk discussion of cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Um, because I remember when I was being, introduced to the topic as a mentor, he always said you have to understand, what you're working on, the networks. You have to understand how networks work. You have to understand how computers work. Because if you can't understand that, then you really can't, you know, understand cybersecurity all that well.
Hmm. But even, for any common Jane and Joe, right, who use a smartphone, who use a computer for whatever reason, some simple cyber hygiene is is needed. They need it. And but the question is, do they know it? um, if they, what they should do, how to do it. And I don't know, when you were introduced to technology back in high school, was that part of the conversation? Here's technology, here's how you secure it, or is that still kind of a thing that is introduced later?
I wouldn't say not in any of the classes I took in high school. Um, might be a little bit different now. I don't know. I would certainly hope so, to be honest. I'd say it's definitely, those kind of topics are definitely introduced later.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. 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 I don't know. It's just introduced a little later. I'd say there are, just some good. Well, there. I mean, realistically, for most people that have, a phone or an iPad or, you know, any of the consumer electronics,
Yeah.
having a good password, keeping it updated, and not downloading anything that's too suspicious is probably going to get you like rid of most potential avenues. If you've got to worry about, a little bit more than that, you might have, other threats that are bigger to worry about.
Yeah.
Um, so,
But two-factor authentication should be something anybody uses today on their phones for anything, really, right?
yep, and that's growing. I've actually seen more attention towards that in the past year, especially going away from just the text notifications, or the email notifications, or the
Yeah.
voice communications. As those can be spoofed pretty easily,
Yeah.
and closer towards the you know authenticator apps, and now things like these passkeys.
Yeah.
um, I'm starting to get some of those myself and use and try and be better, especially with all the accounts that I created when I was a lot younger. Trying to get rid of those.
Yeah.
Um, realize a lot of the poor decisions made in youth are, I wouldn't say they're coming back to bite me, but they're definitely not making my time any easier.
Yeah. And the future is passwordless, right? Isn't that
Mhm.
where technology is taking us these days?
Oh yeah, there are plenty of good initiatives on that. One that I've heard up in conversation is the FIDO initiative, which
Hmm.
is trying to go completely away from passwords.
Yeah.
And I know larger organizations like Google are definitely trying to get behind that movement. Um, honestly, I would love it if we could completely get rid of passwords. I don't like remembering passwords. It's just a complex thing, but it is also significantly more secure. Um, just
Yeah.
yeah.
And the password managers are a good little way to just have the password manager itself create, update, and use the password versus you having to remember them because you have to have unique, long, complex passwords these days. So password managers really also help with them. But I think we're kind of in a stage where this is going to change a lot,
Hmm. Yeah.
like
Um,
everything else. Um,
yeah.
yeah. So
And I
this.
know some trust in password managers has waned in the past few years from breaches. Um,
Yeah.
and, especially with a lot of the larger change in attitude towards two-factor authentication, I don't think I mean, it might take a few more years to get the conversation really started, but I'm really hopeful that, we can start making bigger changes soon about password hygiene and action.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely needed. Now you mentioned CrowdStrike, so that was a bug. It wasn't really a cybersecurity incident, but it did affect systems, Windows systems used by very large organizations around the world, affecting people in real life, whether it's public transportation, airlines not being able to take off, or
Mhm.
local government systems, finance, healthcare. It was an epic debacle that, I think exposed some level of um, vulnerability to how interconnected everything is and how dependent we are on this technology and for it to work. What do you think we've learned from this experience?
Hmm. Um, well, that's again kind of challenging. I know. I'd say there are some things for the software developers, especially from the CrowdStrike perspective. Um, having better hygiene towards code testing and analysis
Hmm.
and processing and stuff like that. Um, because realistically, that was the root of the problem.
Hmm.
Better hygiene towards those kind of aspects would have, could have avoided this. Um, I know there are, because I also remember seeing some critique that these organizations should have been doing like change management testing, the N-1, N-2. But obviously now that we know that, that wasn't possible because that was kind of a forced update. They couldn't, that was a content update. It wasn't actually
Hmm.
something that they could control. So, blaming that way is probably disingenuous. But I would say, you know, evaluating vendor trust, um, change management, or at least revealing some elements of that or how like important that is.
Hmm.
Because again, it's not the best 1-to-1 ratio, okay, or comparison, but it's definitely something that you can consider. And then better DevOps processes,
Yeah,
or safer DevOps processes.
yeah. But software development has been an area of focus by CISA and the government to just kind of force the use of security by design, privacy by design, so that it's not bolted on after the fact, but that it's part of the code development process of secure software development
Mm,
lifecycle. And I think this is kind of highlighting that need, right? Even though CrowdStrike is an amazing company, and their platform and service is, um, you know, extraordinary. There's a reason why everybody was using it, because it works. If they
yeah.
didn't have it, they all would have been hacked by now, and had some serious malware issues, because this platform really uses ML to detect malware strains that may be 0 days and are not even known signatures. So CrowdStrike definitely is commendable as a product and solution. But in general, I think the software development lifecycle process should be reevaluated, perhaps. And like you said, change management.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. But I think it kind of, put a spotlight on cybersecurity and how critical it is. Um, and yes, this was a painful experience, but at the same time, it kind of made the awareness go up. And
Mhm.
maybe that's what we needed, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I said, the question you posed earlier, the past 2 weeks have kind of changed the world's attitude towards cybersecurity in a lot of ways. A lot of people were impacted very negatively. Um,
Yeah.
so I know a lot of people's opinions of cybersecurity have changed a lot.
Yeah. It's a necessity. There's no way around it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the future. How would you end the sentence? The future is.
Okay. Hmm. I would say like this one might really be a little cliche, but I say the future is in the hands of the people.
Mhm.
I'd say we're still kind of in control of our own destiny, even still with cybersecurity, even with these new technologies, with like AI. people are coming in and talking about how, it's going to replace, or I mean, it's definitely going to replace processes, but people have been talking about like replacing jobs, which I still think is a stretch. But I think people still have a significant amount of control, um, especially in towards attitudes towards cybersecurity and technology, because these things don't build themselves.
No.
Um, might be a little cliche, but I still think it's probably the best one I can think of.
And I love that because I couldn't agree more with you because it's still someone who's developing it, and you need good governance, good leadership, who looks at all the different ways that technology can be used, right? Whether it's AI driven or not, it doesn't really matter. We have to make sure that the greater good, people's safety, things
Yeah,
along those lines are still top priority when using technology. So I love that answer. Yeah,
thank you.
it's really important. Now, and I agree also with what you were saying about AI. I read somewhere, it was an HBR article. It said AI will not replace humans, but humans using AI will be replacing humans not using AI. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And I'll pick apart that first sentence, that first part of that, the AI replacing humans. Um, so, as part of some of the work I've done is to investigate some of AI. We have
Mhm.
ended up using it for like a little chat bot to simplify some processes for us internally.
Cool.
Um, it was great. Has a great. I could talk about that all day. I love it. But the big thing is that when I was exposed to this kind of technology, it was kind of like given a new perspective. Even when I had been introduced to it as a senior in college, that was still kind of like a practitioner or a user practitioner, and I was like, okay, I've got this like preconceived notion in my head, and then once I started like building it and testing it on a more defined scale, I'm like, okay, this is actually significantly more limited than what I thought it was capable of.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and so I'd say, you know, even with these new models that are constantly coming out, because I think at the time it was 3.5 and now we've got 4, and now a couple weeks ago we got 4 Omni uh, in the OpenAI spectrum. um, I've seen constantly a lot of new things. Still, I don't think any of it would replace a human. At least I can't imagine it.
Hmm.
um, with replacing people that don't use it, though, that's without a doubt. I've used AI, companion tools like the GPTs or the GitHub copilots, because it can speed up programming, can speed
Hmm.
up dev testing, especially for writing like little small one things. A lot of people are using it to try and write big programs and get disappointed that it doesn't work, but it's not really what it's good for. But
Yeah.
as long as you really understand what it is great for, you
Yeah.
can simplify things, make things a whole lot faster, um, and just be more efficient what you do.
Yeah. So, what does an analyst do? What role do you play in terms of instant response, whether it is planning, preparation, or the actual response to an incident?
Well, I kind of do all of it. um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's realistically kind of we do a lot of things. We like to have a breadth of knowledge. Um, so some days we're working as like engineers, some days we're working as analysts, and some days we're working as like incident handlers. It really kind of just depends on what comes up in that day.
Yeah.
We don't have incidents every day, thankfully. Knock on wood. Um, yeah. So yeah, but we try and secure our systems as best we can in preparation. Um,
Mhm.
do all sorts of threat modeling, trying to make sure that we are best prepared. And we're constantly always thinking about how we can improve our systems. And then making sure that our processes, if we have to go into an incident kind of scenario, that we've got things locked down, and that we've got a very good understanding. So we're constantly trying to like learn through all the tools that we have in our fleet and all the computers that we have on our fleet. We're trying to make sure we have a good understanding of all of them, how they work, keep ourselves up to date. Yeah, a lot of it's really in the preparation versus the
Mhm.
incident
Yeah.
itself.
What are some of the tools that analysts use? What are some of the most prevalent ones?
Well, I guess in well, so I think a lot of them are uh, EDRs, and then
Mm-hmm.
EDRs that kind of aggregate into SIEM tools
Yeah.
is probably the best one. Networking, and then network security tools like firewalls. I'd say the biggest one to know about is probably the really the two ones, the EDRs and the SIEM tools for the aggregation of events, and then towards the responsive events.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those are kind of the and the things that I've done. It's probably one of those two,
Mm-hmm.
trying to diagnose and triage whatever is happening, and then how we're actually going to fix it and solve it and kick those people out.
Yeah. Our ISSA is organizing in-person hands-on training around Splunk and Sumo Logic. Those are some common tools in this field, right? Are any
Mhm.
others that you would recommend kind of keeping in mind?
Well, I know both of those are enterprise grade. I know the open source alternative is the Elk stack with the Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. I feel like that's one's coming to the first of my head. But it's the
Interesting.
Elk stack, and that was kind of introduced to me when I was a student. When we had to kind of build that, and it basically just acts as like a data aggregation SIEM tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of general. It's open because it's open source. It's general, so it's really for any kind of aggregation of data. But we used it a lot for talking about like the application of SIEMs, how to set them up, how do we set rules and things like that. Um, so yeah, usually if it's enterprise grade, I'd say Splunk and Sumo Logic are what I've been exposed to most of the time, and then Elk Stack is if you're trying to learn.
That's cool. That's awesome. Um, Now, how important is it, in your opinion, that leadership plays a role in incident response, planning, preparations, things like that?
Well, I think the strongest elements are in during the actual incident.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say a lot of my leadership, learning came from the Civil Air Patrol. That was really one of their big things is leadership development. Um, because those when you get into an incident, you're kind of put in a stressful scenario, and you've kind of got to act quickly. If you're not on top of it, or you're that's kind of where those leadership skills come into play, because it can show a little bit of weakness if you're not prepared. um it's but if you've got those leadership skills kind of locked down, it can go pretty smooth. Obviously, it's an incident, it's a breach, you're not really happy, but you know, good leadership, good training is kind of what makes it from a serious problem to a we're going to get through this, we're going to be okay kind of
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah. Yeah. I think good leadership when it comes around cybersecurity in general is critical, right? You need that buy-in from a top down, building a culture of cybersecurity and cyber awareness, but also um, providing the moral support for you as an analyst, who are trying to do so many things all at the same time, and empowering you to do your job to the fullest of your ability with the right tool set, the resources, and so forth. But also, when I saw the response to the CrowdStrike event, right? How the CEO presented the matter. He was bringing a lot of transparency forward. He was very honest about it. He worked with his partners. He made it clear, his clients are his first priority. that's the kind of leadership I think everybody could learn from, in when it comes to incident response, because not everybody can is prepared to have that conversation, has the support, or has gone through an incident response tabletop or whatever planning efforts to say, okay, these are the things we're going to be doing when this kind of scenario happens, and this is how we're going to communicate, and this is who is going to communicate that. And I think, good leadership demonstrates, caring about the clients and not blaming, the analysts or whoever made the mistake, because that was to me very noticeable, is that he wasn't throwing anybody under the bus. He was taking full accountability. And that really, I feel like, should give people comfort to know that, the leadership is fully engaged and supportive of getting to the bottom and getting things fixed fast. So,
Yeah, I 100% agree. Especially in the big incidents like that, having the CEO be there as representative and talking about it with the transparency and ownership, it's important. It kind of like, because whenever you have these kind of breaches, you're losing a significant amount of trust.
mm-hmm.
And that transparency, that honesty is a small step towards gaining it back, but it's usually the best step. If you're still trying to be like, cover it up or trying to be a little like secretive, you're usually just going to be losing even more trust.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And to me, it was just, great leadership, but also commendable that, this is what they do. Incident response is what CrowdStrike does. There was a quick response. There was quick follow up, and action taken. So, very commendable all around, I thought.
Yeah.
So, what are the threats that keep you up at night?
Oh. Hmm. I'd say most of what I guess has been bothering me over the past year is probably less technical, but probably closer to the social engineering kind of threats.
Mhm.
And this is still kind of a follow up of generative AI.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't kidding when I really said some of those things I get every once in a while are very convincing. Um,
Mhm.
and I like when we've you know, I've tried to look into them, investigate them, and it's kind of you know these problems are just really never going to go away. For
Mhm.
these cyber criminals that are doing these campaigns, these phishing campaigns, you know, even if even if you try and shut them down, it's still too lucrative for them. They're just going to keep doing it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, how do I balance this problem that you can try and investigate, try and tackle as much as you want, that's literally just never going to go away, and how do you balance that? And then how do you balance training with engineers and those in you know or those employees? Um,
Yeah, so good security awareness training
mhm.
matters. Yeah, for sure. So you're working full time, but you told me last time we were at ICE to say that you're also still going to school. So how do you do it? Tell us what it is and why.
It's a lot of late nights. That's how I do it. Very tired a lot of the time. Um, I would say, so I'm currently working on my master's in network technology, specializing in cybersecurity, still at ECU. Um, and that's kind of me trying to continue down that path of education. Um, I like, I know that, college is not for everyone, or at least it's not their preferred avenue of learning. I'm actually very positive towards college and learning in that aspect. So
Mhm.
to me, it sounded like a very, easy continuation. And it also, I'm trying to also look out towards the future. So I know, some places require, master's level degrees for managerial positions. And
Mhm.
that's something that I hope to go. That's a path I hope to go down later in my career. So I'm kind of trying to like look ahead and do it now, because I've gotten advice from others that have gone down the path. A lot of people say it's harder to do it later in their career when they're
Mhm.
no longer in that grind of studying in that manner. It's
Yeah.
you know it's like that transition from going to academic to professional, and then you're trying to go back, and that's
Yeah.
also a very trying
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I agree with that because I did my master's when I had small kids.
Oh,
And
that adds it.
that was hard just to get into that grind and structured consistency of getting work done, but then doing it in combination of a job and kids running all over the place. It was a struggle. I don't know
Oh yeah.
how I did it, but it got done.
I,
But I think you're right. But it's good to kind of do it in combination when you're working, right? Is there a value of doing it while you're still working the masters?
oh yeah, I'd say it was 100%. Also, a lot of the other students were also doing it the same way, where they're taking
Mhm.
classes, or they're also later in their careers and taking these classes. So it can connect to the other graduate students. But I realized from the time that I was doing my work in undergrad towards once I started doing my grad work, I started to see a lot of like changes in how I would approach some of these assignments, these attitudes or these beliefs that I had developed. Because once I got out of like a purely theoretical kind of landscape, which is what academia can be, and into a more practical setting, I'm like, okay, I've actually seen these things, and this is how I'd actually approach it. And so it kind of changed a little bit, and it kind of like given me like a new baseline of how do I tackle and understand, and how do I relate to these assignments? How do I you relate to my classmates in these manners?
Yeah, yeah, that's really awesome and good for you
Thank
for
you.
continuing your learning. Um, Now we talked about the tools at the educational curriculum. Um, should the educational process evolve to be this constant learning thing, where it's not just a period of time and then poof, you're working? Should it be something different than what it is today? Should
Hmm.
we reinvent education?
Well, I don't know if I'm the person to do that. I mean, I also know that there's some attitudes towards why we have these kind of like degree-based systems is for an added credentialing kind of system. Just like we
Mhm.
have certifications to credential us, we have degrees to credential us. And I know that's a lot of the way that professional like firms kind of treat degrees. It's kind of just a checkbox. Um, I think does that kind of create challenges in creating actual learning environments? I think so. Um, uh, and I also think more flexible, like continuous training, especially throughout a
Mhm.
career, is definitely better. Keeps you
Yeah.
more up to date. Because if you just do a bachelor's degree towards the beginning of your career and that's all you do throughout your
Mhm.
entire career, then you're going to be significantly lost, especially the further away you get from that degree.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I I wish some aspects of it would change. I guess I wish some aspects stay the same. Um, I still like that. I have no regrets over going and getting my bachelor's or my master's now. Um, and I think they're just going to help me down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. So, looking back, what would you give yourself any advice, whether to your 13-year-old or 16-year-old self, knowing now what you know?
Oh yeah. And this is kind of something I mentioned towards earlier. Is kind of the be bolder element.
Mhm.
Um, I remember like going and going to some of these ISSA meetings, and honestly, they were just happy with my presence being there. Um, and what that kind of created like a sense of one of the big like trademarks of me being there is my youth, and I'm like, okay, well, that's eventually going to go away. So eventually, I have to have like something to credential and say myself what I've actually done. That's like that's pretty cool as well. Because just being there, when you're young is pretty cool, but eventually, yeah, you're no longer the youngest member. So I'd say be bold,
Yeah.
try new things. I remember, other than like the Civil Air Patrol and the Cyber Patriot, that was all that I really did to like do that. Um, and probably could have done more. And I remember telling like, and I did, that was all that was not associated with school. So I did have like some challenges at the school in organizations. I just didn't take part in them. Um, so I told myself to be bolder when I was 17 going into college. And I would say that significantly changed my attitude towards the learning process in college and
Hmm.
towards my growth during it, and then even after as I moved into the professional world.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say be bold, just be bolder.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that.
yeah.
Really good. Um, Now, what would be your why? What is your purpose in life, Colin?
So I brought this up because yeah, this was like the tough challenge, tough question. Um, uh, you know, I think deep down inside, it's probably eat good food, but that's probably not the best one to talk about. Um, so I would say okay. So this is something that I've tried to think about more. I think it's trying to um, help protect others in kind of my own way.
Hmm.
Um, I know that a lot of people, seek that kind of protecting others through like, the military, through first response kind of work, through medical.
Hmm.
And I'd say that there is a solid enough way to protect others with these technology. To
Hmm.
a lot of people, technology is very scary. A lot of these new tech things that come in can be very intimidating. People don't know how to interact or handle them, and so cybersecurity professionals kind of the person that they've got to be in there first. They've got to understand this, and they've got to kind of like demystify it. And that was kind of one of the big things I kind of came into like last year. Um, this AI thing was very new, and our kind of motivation to do all these projects surrounded it was kind of an attitude of like we need to understand how this technology works so we can protect other people. We could protect ourselves and protect others about it. So
Yeah.
um, realistically, I'd say that my purpose is to help protect.
Yeah. I love that. And I always ask this question, right? The why, the purpose. And it's a very common theme. And I feel like this is what we need to be talking about when we talk to young people, right? If we want to recruit them, we shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be just talking about what we do. We should talk about why we do what we do. Because I think that would be super compelling, protect the people that you love, protect everything we take for granted, whether it's clean water, electricity, AC when it's
Mm-hmm.
scorching hot out. Those little things that we just turn on with a flip of a switch. We have to protect that. And
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity is definitely a field that does that. Everything needs cybersecurity. So that is a
Yep.
fantastic why.
Thank you.
Um, Final question for you. What are you grateful for?
Mm. I would say I'm probably the most grateful for all the people I've had in my life throughout this journey. Um, I don't know, if I didn't have them, I don't know if I'd exactly have made the same choices
Mhm.
and had the same opportunities that I did. They have allowed me to take a lot of risks and explore pathways that I didn't know were options at certain stages. Um, that's probably what I'm most grateful for.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm still grateful that they're they're sticking by me even after all this time. Um, you know, they've had my back uh, since the first day I met them when I was just a 15-year-old kid, and they've helped me grow. And I'd say I mean I would like now I get to do all sorts of these cool things, and they get to, you know, watch and see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say, I was at ISSA when you were still a younger kid, and truly an inspiration to me. And you give me hope, and hopefully you give other people hope listening and watching this podcast. You know that Gen Z and all the stereotypes being made and implied about them, will actually
Mhm.
save us from ourselves. I think that we are too easy to underestimate young people, and look how far you've already gone, and come, just by being present, following the lead of other people, and investing in your community, which I know that you do as well. So, I couldn't be more grateful to, to share your story, where it's, you're working hard, you're getting a master's, you're also dedicated and supporting your community, and really putting your heart in everything that you're doing. So, hopefully, this is kind of debunking all of these stereotypes about Gen Z, because you guys are really doing great things. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So to wrap this up, you get to ask me one question. That was the unique twist to season two. So if you have one, feel free to ask it right now.
Okay. Um, this is a question I like to ask towards all sorts of people, from early career to late career, because I think it's great at, how do we talk about, or like how do we learn. So that's usually how I like to ask. Like I said, my biggest thing is constantly learning. So I
Wow.
ask people, what or how do you like to learn about new things? This kind of in the context of what, if you need to keep up to date on a new cybersecurity thing, how do you do it?
Wow, that is such a good question. Um, I read this book by Jim Quick, and he talks about understanding how your brain works so that you can work your brain. And so every person has, a unique brain,
Hmm.
but has a unique way of learning, right? So you have to understand, how do you learn best. I think I'm definitely a visual learner, and I have to learn by doing as well. But at the same time, I like to read, um, but I love watching people do what they do. Um, I've done a lot of job shadowing throughout my career. And so if I watch someone do something maybe once or twice, I can easily follow up on that. And that's why I feel we had this conversation, the importance of internship, and providing the opportunity of having some learning, hands-on learning experiences. I think is so important, because people can then, grow into new skills and new roles, and nobody has to stay in this one box for their whole life, right? I think the question of what do you want to be when you grow up is ridiculous now. Like, you can be 100 things in your lifetime, right? So you don't have to answer that question anymore. You just have to say, what is the first thing that you want to do, and start with that, because I feel that any human being has so much potential. It's limitless, literally limitless. And once you recognize that about yourself, you can do and learn anything you want to do. Just set your mind to it. And so I would say, just surround yourself with the right people to find good teachers, good mentors, um, who guide you along the way on how to get the knowledge, but then also the experience. But to me, it's all about watching someone do it and then doing it myself. As
That's
long as
awesome. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I know when people always ask me like what do you want to do when you grow up? And it's like I think now that like people like to think that this is now what grown up is. I'm like, I still got a lot of growing to do. What are you talking about?
Yes, yes,
Not there yet.
exactly. Yeah, that question just needs to be thrown out of the conversation. Like it's there are so many chapters in the book of life for all of us. So you can't limit yourself to just one thing. You have to understand that you're just capable of anything.
Yeah.
And it's just so much fun to learn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was amazing, Colin. And thank you so much for sharing your story and giving some really good advice to young people, but also parents about agency and also leaders about internships and providing young students a chance to prove themselves, get their hands dirty, give them some fun projects, test new technology. I think you've given some great recommendations to people of all walks of life. So thank you so much. You've This was amazing.
Yeah. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Bye, Colin.
Bye.